Yeah, all right. Life Spirit Tech coming at you fresh. We're doing big things. We got a whole forum here to talk about some important issues. Intro, hit it. Get out of here. Matt, how we doing? Matthew, you here? Tune back in. Let's see what's going on. Today is Ferguson. We're talking all about Ferguson. What's going on in New York? What's going on in Missouri? What's going on everywhere that we have going on? So that is what's happening. And we're talking about the verdict. We're talking about everything that's happening with the verdict, all the riots, all the craziness. What is up? How can we, as a community, talk about this? Get the action in order.
As a world community.
As a world community also. How we doing? And Mr. William Walsh, he is a hypnotist. He is a smart Australian guy. He is a lifestyle and social dynamic executive in this mission to get the information out, to get the knowledge going.
I'm going to be representing the everyman, the ignorant everyman, because I don't know a lot about what's been happening in Ferguson.
Hello.
So this guy's going to be discussing it.
Yes, and we have our guest, the pride and joy of this conversation coming from Californication, California, sunny San Diego. Well, if you don't know, this area is a utopia. It's kind of like Maruba Beach meets, Ocean Beach is like Maruba Beach, Pacific Beach is kind of like Bondi, and the city of San Diego, like Sydney, similar. Small, big city.
Okay.
And we have Matt Davis on today, and we're going to be talking about the Ferguson case. So explain to us, if you don't know, and the people that are viewing don't know, and they may be able to tune in, what are some questions that, can you just explain what's going on around the world right now?
Well, I mean, I think, right, yeah, I think, you know, first of all, I just want to say thanks for setting this up. It's been great, and, you know, sorry we're having so many technical difficulties, but, yeah, I think, you know, everybody's pretty aware of what's going on in Ferguson. I know certainly in America it's a really big story, but, you know, it's an isolated incident where an unarmed black teenager was shot and killed by a law enforcement officer. But I think the reason that it's getting so much play in the media here and elsewhere is just because people see it as a microcosm. You know, it is, in some people's estimation, indicative of a trend where if you are poor or you have black and brown skin in this country, that you're not always afforded the same protections under the law as you know, more affluent folks, more wealthy folks, or even, you know, some people will go so far as to say it's directly related to skin color. Now everybody's, you know, it's really contentious, and in fact, I think how we connected on this was I had made a Facebook post.
Yeah, that's him going out on the connection here, but I'll finish the story on that. We made a post on Facebook, and I actually talked about it, and there was a Marine sergeant communicating some areas of concern, whether the police was okay with the whole scenario, what happened, and basically the guy was charging, an African American was charging a man who was unarmed and the African American guy got shot 6 times. So now we're dealing with a little bit of should he have shot? Should he have used the taser, a non-violent procedure? And we had the forum going down on Facebook, and we both kind of were queuing up on this. Let's put a debate together. Let's put some knowledge together so that we can get something going on a forum to speak. And that is basically how we connected. And then I just started doing more research. And now there's a verdict in play. There's the National Guard in Missouri. There's all sorts of different people in play that are actually now having a big demonstration to try to get fair and equality going again in this case. So what we really need to do is get things going. Hey, Matt, I was just filling in everyone about how we met and how we started with this communication.
Yeah,
And
sorry about that. I'm not sure it. You know, the system keeps booting me out here, but yeah. So you know, we that's how we connected. I mean, we met each other actually on a cruise with mutual friends, a big group about a year ago. That's how we became Facebook friends. And I know that you're really engaged and interested in this topic, and I had made a post to catch your attention, and so that's how we got here. And you know, I am definitely a political animal. I have a degree in American history and political science. I follow political discourse. I've actually, my first job was with the San Diego City Council District 5, with what was then Councilman Brian Mainshine's office. He's since moved on to California State Legislature, but I've always had a very keen interest in political discourse because you know, it's an important topic. It's how we govern ourselves, and it's how power is distributed. And you know, it's either a system that can give justice and equality to the masses, or you know, if it's misused, conversely, it can also deprive them of that. And I think that is really the reason why Ferguson, you know, the whole incident has become such a huge thing. It's not because as tragic as it is, it's not because one young man lost his life. It's because people see it as a trend. And certainly, you know, I'm not as well versed in, you know, Australian politics or, you know, certain political discourse around the world. I try and stay informed on all that stuff, but really, you know, my sole focus is in the country that I was born in and that I grew up in. And certainly, you know, the last year we hear, you know, and just anecdotally, every couple days, it seems like it's not even big news anymore, where you hear about someone getting killed at the hands of police. And, you know, if that wasn't bad enough, you know, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of each case, was it warranted, was it not warranted, but it seems like no matter what the circumstance, police are almost never even indicted, let alone you know, forced to stand trial for virtually anything that they do. I mean, in the Eric Garner case, you know, an unarmed black man was choked to death. They admitted that choking is not a procedure that police are trained to do, and in fact, they're not allowed. They're not supposed to choke people. And yet, we just found out that that the officer responsible for the death is not even going to be indicted. Much the same that Officer Darren Wilson, after the Ferguson thing, wasn't indicted. And so I think there is, quite understandably, especially from minorities and poor and the socioeconomically disadvantaged in this country, that are kind of, you know, it's kind of a feeling of exasperation. Like, what circumstances would actually lead to an indictment where at the very least, the officer would actually have to stand trial, which in our legal system would do a great deal to help us discover the truth. I mean, you know, once you have a trial, then there's, you know, formal discovery. There's, you know, testimony and cross-examination. There are, you know, there's 230 plus years of legal precedent that goes into trying to discover the truth. And when you have a trial, you know, it's much more likely that lies are discovered. I mean, you know, another recent, very sensationalized case here in America that has nothing to do with the topic we're talking about was the, you know, the Casey Anthony murder trial. And, you know, it came to light throughout the course of the trial and discovery that her, you know, that a lot of her original statement was bogus. But if that had never gone to trial, you know, there would be no way to determine that. And so I think that's where the frustration comes from, is there's not even a legitimate public forum where testimony can be questioned, where facts can be either proven or disavowed. And so, you know, people, there's a big conflict. And then, you know, you have the other side, largely white middle-class America, that thinks, hey, you know, these are our law enforcement folks. You know, they get paid to do a tough and dangerous job. And, you know, we should take things like this with a grain of salt because we weren't there. And most of us don't have, you know, military or police training. So, That gets thrown out a lot. That if you weren't there and you don't understand the training, that maybe your opinion is coming from a place of ignorance. But it has been a very contentious debate. As Ryan, I know you saw on my Facebook page. I mean, what did that get? Like, 80 or 90 comments, and everybody had really strong opinions one way or the other. And I think you recognize that, and I think that's kind of the reason you put this on tonight, is you recognize that it's an important and very controversial issue.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and it kind of gives us an overview. If people around the world don't know about the Rodney King issue too often, unless you're an American citizen or whatever, it was a guy that got beat in race riots happened in L.A., not too far away from San Diego. I've heard of it. Yeah, so it's pop culture nowadays, and I've been having a little bit of issue with police brutality as well, and also unfairness, and had in my early days been put on a scenario where I had been almost not racism, but they almost viewed me as a troublemaker. And in my younger days, we listened to pop, and so I've had that experience outside of Washington D.C. and I'd seen friends I would have hanging out with racial profiling, and they're actually taught this way. And police all over the country, and especially in the Ferguson area, are targeting suspects, and I don't know the exact name for it, but there's in many cases they target, they search, the search and seizure, illegal searching. We don't know to plead the fifth these days, and well, there's a military industrial complex as well. So they're separating society right now from people that have wealth and people who have a certain type of skin color and a certain type of social demographic. So it's interesting. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that most of us who were young and potentially, mischievous youths have at some point interacted with law enforcement. And, I think that's, my perspective is informed from that somewhat the same. And, obviously I don't have, I'm a white guy, so I don't have to deal with racial profiling, but I certainly have experienced firsthand where officers will take advantage of the people they come into contact with not understanding their full rights under the law. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to make a blanket statement here against, all officers, that they're all bad or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but I think it is an important discussion to have. I think I can point to statistics. There's virtually no doubt for any reasonably minded person that there is a difference in the way justice is administered in this country. If you're black or brown, and you touched on it these days, if you're poor, that also has a great deal to do with it. You can't afford as good a defense. If you're a little guy, it's easier to get picked on. That's just the way of things. So I really think it is an important discussion to have, and you can look at statistics, like in Ferguson, for example. 85% of possession arrests, drug arrests at traffic stops are black and brown, despite the fact that we know that there's virtually no difference in drug usage rates, for age demographics based on race. White people use drugs as much as black or brown people do. Sorry, go ahead.
Racism and a few other elements to this are actually just distractions to the actual event of the brutality as well. And so people are focusing on wealth and status and race and all this, when really it's more to do with law enforcement being, I don't know, better.
More military. Yeah, well, and I don't think there's any question that post 9/11, again, speaking specifically about Americans, we are a more fearful nation, a more fearful people post 9/11 than we were beforehand. I just believe that. And you can see, and as a result, we've become a more martialized state. We've become a more militarized state. You can look at any number of things, from the passage of legislation like the Patriot Act to the secret FISA courts to the NSA spying. There are new loopholes around individual liberties that have been created in this country in the last 10 to 15 years. And, they're all under the guise of, well, it's for our safety. And, I mean, the balancing act, the pendulum between safety and freedom is always one that's swinging, and it's a valid debate to have. I'm not saying that total liberty should always win out over total safety, but it is an important discussion to have. So, you know, again, speaking personally, I was upset to find out that, you know, taking it back to the Ferguson thing, I was very upset to find out that the guy wasn't at least going to stand trial.
Yeah, the verdict. That's the thing. Also, that's kind of what set everything off. At this current stage, we're at the verdicts, and it was told worldwide. I've heard about it on the news. And a quick story: we were doing a hug workshop. We were doing a social experiment out on Sydney Circular Quay near the Sydney Opera House, and we were hugging different demographics of people, from old, elderly to Aboriginal to white, black to Islam, and we were finding Asian, white, everything. So we were hugging people. We were finding that some people don't like to show love as much, and and at the end we met some Aboriginal authors that were at an engagement, and we had discussed the Ferguson case with these Aboriginals, and Aboriginals have been crucially segregated, killed, separated from their parents. Their culture has been ripped out. It is quite a sad story. It's worse than the African American scenario in America. And
I've heard that actually.
Just as bad, anyway. Yeah.
I could show you some pictures of them in the park, and they just drink continuously. They're like Native Americans, but they don't have a necessary tribe.
Right. Yeah, I've actually heard that. You know, like I said at the outset here, I'm nowhere near as well versed in you know, like Australian politics or, you know, many places across the globe as I am in American politics, because you know, it's self-interest. I grew up here, so, you know, that inevitably kind of becomes your first concern. Even though I have, sorry.
He's gonna explain a little bit about Australia. What's the social class like? How the nation's set up, how the government is organized, and from the Julian Assange to the Aboriginals with the background where you came from, Byron Bay, where there's quite a culture there as well.
Actually, even just talking about here, particularly in Sydney, we had an incident not long ago where I think there was an Aboriginal boy who was chased by the police, and he ended up on a bicycle or a skateboard. He ended up tripping, falling, being chased by police officers for whatever reason, and he was impaled. And it was disgusting, the result that came of that. Like, whose fault was it? You know, the police were chasing him. Had he actually done anything wrong? There's actually a few cases like that where the Aboriginals, and it's only now being recognised. They've got like National Sorry Day, I think, where they actually get a lot of people that they apologise to the Aboriginal race. They're bringing back a lot of Aboriginal names for land and pieces of land. They're recognising the Aboriginal rights of the land originally and giving us insight to the names of the land and with the original, you know, terminology of the land. We're being enlightened to more of the magic of Aboriginals and the survival techniques and their dreamtime culture, like their spiritualism, and learning a lot. We're seeing a lot more about their art, and as I said, like their philosophy, like how their cave paintings are apparently Aboriginals are one of the oldest races in the world as well. So
yeah,
I don't have any people believe in that at all. You know, that does sound like there's a lot of parallels between Aboriginal and Native Americans in this country.
We're young, going the same way as America in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's there's some sort of police presence here. They're not as in your face, but there's always sort of signs saying "Don't throw trash out," and they have like a funny saying behind it: "Peace, not love, make love, not war." And there's a lot of like
police symbols are around, like the blue and white checks is the Australian police symbol, and that you see signs with that even, so you feel like there is a presence, a strong presence.
There's a lot of rules down the line, and most people act pleasant towards each other. Like I went to a Israel-Palestine to do interviews, and it was a peaceful protest, and it was down in the town hall area, and I noticed that there was pretty much no issues, and people were talking about the Julian Assange, they were talking about things of that nature, and they're also talking about like the real issues of Palestine and Israel. And I learned both perspectives, the stuff that the media never told, you know, all the ways that they've been downplayed. So it's another issue of people with less power being pile drived or plowed over in that scenario. And what were we gonna say?
The similarities actually of that incident in Redfern of the child being impaled, being chased by the police, that actually incited a riot. There were something called the Redfern riots, where the entire community, Aboriginal community, started rioting, and that's what's going on in Ferguson. It sounds like, where an incident has happened, and the community has rallied together, almost like for vigilante justice or something, but it's not in a bad way. It needs to be expressed.
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, we saw that not just in Ferguson here, but all around the country. I mean, I live in San Diego, which is literally almost 2,000 miles away from Ferguson, and they shut down protesters shut down the Interstate 5 here in San Diego. So it was all across the country, and this was, again, this was Black Friday after Thanksgiving, a full, I mean, the original shooting was in, August? So after the decision came down, there was a lot of frustration, and that kind of brings me to the next point that I wanted to make, which is, the protests and all that stuff becomes kind of the story itself. So the protest and then the backlash against the protests, and the discussion about, oh well, in Michael Brown's case, we know that he was shoplifting about 5 minutes before he interacted and eventually got killed by Officer Wilson. And that became the focus, is what kind of guy was Michael Brown? Was he really a good guy, or was he a thug, this and that? The protesters were looting and stealing from the stores, and, that's wrong. And that, the noise around those things actually kind of became louder than the issue itself. So that was really, I think, back to that original post I made, the point I was really trying to make was, we need to do a better job. Our country has terrible attention deficit disorder. We cannot focus on one thing for more than like 15 seconds.
And we're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, sure. So, really, the only issue that matters in this case is whether or not Michael Brown posed a objectively lethal threat to Officer Wilson, not when they were scuffling inside the car, but later when he eventually fired the shots that proved to be fatal. And all the rest is white noise. I mean, whether or not, even if he was the worst guy, I mean, that was the point I really wanted to make, was that in order to have a truly just system, a society that gives out justice in an egalitarian manner, in order for that to happen, the rules have to be the same for the worst scumbag of a human being on the planet as they are for a choir boy, president of the United States. The law should be the same. So that was really the point I was originally trying to get across, was the only issue that we should be focusing on is how reasonable is Officer Wilson's claim that Michael Brown, at the time he killed him, represented a potentially lethal threat to his life. Everything else about what kind of person he is, or the fact that he held up a liquor store, or the riots and the protesting and the looting that followed, none of that really strikes to the issue, which is an officer has a duty to not fire lethal shots unless they or someone else is in lethal danger, and that's, in our legal system, that's not a subjective test. That is what's called a reasonable person test, which means you put a reasonable person with the exact same training. So in this case, a reasonable police officer in the exact same circumstances with the exact same series of events, and would it be objective to assume that that lethal force was authorized? And if not, at the very least, he should have gone to trial. Now, whether or not that was the thing, is I got so much vitriol and backlash from many people who I call my friends, who are just, further to the right on the, political landscape and the political scale than I am, virulently and angrily going after me, because, it's a tough job, and the officer has a right to defend himself and this and that. And I wasn't even saying he should have been convicted. My only argument was there at least needed to be a trial. When 12 shots get fired at an unarmed suspect from anywhere from 20 to 150 feet away, depending on who you believe, at the very least there needed to be just a trial and discovery and all that. and then find out if if guilt is warranted or not.
And he was only a young guy as well. It wasn't like a mature-aged person who poses a threat. A child isn't going to pose a threat at the worst of times, aren't they? I mean, without a weapon.
Well, I mean, he was 18, and he was a very.
Well, just repeat that. You've just dropped out there for a second.
Yeah. So the guy was 18, 6'5". He was a big enough gentleman.
Right.
He posed a threat. He ran at him. And if you put yourself in the officer's shoes, so let's play devil's advocate. We're sitting here. We're in a comfortable place. We haven't actually been in a thugged out area, rap music with gangsters around, with cops.
Adrenaline runs high.
Yeah, adrenaline's running high. People pursuing methods of kind of vigilantism, and they hold a grudge against the cops. So this guy's running at him. The cop's like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? He goes to pull out the taser or pull out the regular gun. He's so trained. Plus, we're talking about post-traumatic syndrome. We're talking about cops who've had many issues dealing with people who are fighting against them every single day. People lying to them every single day of the job. It's a scummy job. They have a ton of issues where they've seen partners die. They've seen people get
I think the problem lies within the community. All right, what the fuck was that guy running at him in the first place for? Then we need to train our communities better, provide more resources for our communities, so they're not fighting against the cops so hard then as well.
Yeah, that's true. The community is a wild set of banshees, and
the cops are copping the flack from the government not looking after the communities in the first place, and then the cops have to cop the crap from that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt, we were just talking about the situation where would you pull the trigger in that situation when they're running, a 6-foot guy is scaring the hell out of a police officer. You've been
sorry, I'm having tons of technical difficulties here.
We filled you in.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm going to explain this as we go. You're in a situation.
Tons of issues.
We're seeing someone get literally charged at, and a little kid's walking around with a fake pistol. What are you going to do? Are you going to think about the ways that you can defend your own life and make justice, or are you going to be in the situation where you're going to be a law-abiding cop and go with what we need to go with?
Did the guy have a weapon?
One of them didn't, and one of them had a fake weapon. And he was told on an all-in-one call, this gentleman might have a fake weapon. So there's a ton of issues where we really need to put ourselves in those shoes, and plus they've been trained. A lot of them are ex-military. They're killers, man. The only job you can really get back into when you get into society is a cop. But now they're getting a little bit too much power, a little bit too much authority. They don't get convicted because this is part of the program to defend the rich class. We're talking about 99% versus the 1%. So we're talking who's got the money, who's going to be defended, who has more safety. If you go back to my village in Fairfax, Virginia, one of the wealthiest areas outside of Washington, D.C., has a ton of just stupid money, and everyone's being defended. Everyone works for the government. Everyone works for missile development. It's one of the highest class areas in the world, and it's all 200 plus total income. You got and one of the safest areas, but then you have an underlying citizens with a bunch of blacks, and they have a bunch of Hispanics. And guess what? They move them across the river in Maryland. So they separate social classes. They don't allow the same educational process. So that's one of the issues.
Because Matt, we were talking about how it's possibly the government's fault that they're not looking after these communities properly, and then the police actually cop the flack from these communities being not looked after. Yeah.
Guys, I'm gonna have to take a quick break and figure out what's going on here. I apologize. It's just something's going on with my apparatus here, and it's.
We can totally hear you.
But I can't hear you guys again. So awesome.
It's been fun, yeah.
If not amongst yourselves, I'll give you a topic. Ferguson, Missouri. Go. I'll be back in 5 minutes.
All right, cool.
Okay, let me elaborate on that a little bit. So basically, we're going through a revolution. It's almost like the 1960s again. Okay, people are getting involved in psychedelics. People are getting involved in mass communities. People are getting involved in the new age order, new age thinking. We're not as stupid as we once were. There's information, there's internet, there's collaboration between friends. We're not as separate as we once were. Facebook has brought knowledge from all over the world. I'm just as involved in the states matters as I am involved in this area.
But coming from just on that point, just coming from a mode of ignorance and not following the news so much and not doing this kind of thing, is it possible that the riots in Ferguson, because I saw a report, we were watching a report before about how there was a peaceful protest on the issue. So obviously there are people that are, you know, supporting the cause and trying to get this sorted out and showing community spirit with a peaceful protest. That makes sense. But, you know, looting, plundering, and rioting within the community. Okay, people are pissed off, but if I'm pissed off about my next door neighbor's kid getting shot, I'm not going to go and smash into a shop and start stealing crap. So maybe there's a lot of ignorance being bred with technology spreading around. Oh, hey, someone's been killed and shot and it was the police's fault. Let's all just
it's a fun event.
Go fucking crazy.
It's a fun event. Hey, hun, we're going to go protest. Hey, bro, let's go protest. This sounds fun.
Here's a smoke grenade. Let's fucking throw these around.
Fuck the cops. Molotov cocktail.
Fuck the cops.
It always happens. During a revolution, this is how the balance of powers.
Hyped up.
It's all about a balance of power. It's a mini revolution until now the National Guard's involved. So now a scary old military industrial complex, big old machine guns, big old
trains. As soon as they start rolling tanks in, it's about me and my next door neighbors getting these fucking tanks out of our street. So, you know, I understand.
It's crazy, but the thing is, now that the knowledge is out there, now that until people calm down, this is a big issue, and there's gonna be a change. There has to be a change, and there is a revolution going on, and that's what people don't want to report. So there's news companies like Vice, and there's companies like conscious groups who are talking about it. There's a lot of people doing ayahuasca who are spiritually involved. There needs to be a discussion forum, and there needs to be equality, man. You can't just protect these rich people, man. You just got to protect everyone. Give them some jobs, give them some future, and they won't be on the streets hustling all day and dealing drugs and learning that violence is part of their life. Get them out of those communities, separate them a little bit, integrate them into higher stability, more security, more life. And we need to get rid of some of the controlling powers. It's almost turned into us versus them, rather than one. And I think the media is making us, they're separating and hypnotizing everyone to say, oh, fuck darky or fuck the Islamophobia theory. And now we're slowly going into this crazy new millennium with all of this technology and all this Christmas going on. We need to show more love, and we need to stop shooting little kids. And if that was, think of it as your kid, man, he got killed. His parents must be crazy. They have feelings, they have love, they have everything else, and it's a big community.
Yeah, but I will say one thing, and maybe call me ignorant. That's what I'm here to represent, the ignorant community, the ignorant side of things. But
Matt's on again. Let's say welcome
back.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, you look like you're in a horror movie right now.
Yeah. So what happened was my computer's sound is not working, and the wall charger on my phone was not charging fast enough to keep up with the live video feed. So I had to go to a direct current charger in my car. So I'm now talking to you from the front seat of my Mustang.
Changing location.
See, Matt is a true warrior. He's given everyone an educational platform. He comes on and he goes tech. He's an innovative warrior. He's a ninja. Keep
up the good work, Matt. Yes.
So that's why I look like I'm in a horror story right now, because the lighting in here is the lighting from my dome lamp in my car.
He's, ladies and gentlemen, he's just so dark and edgy. He just wants to show his...
He doesn't want to reveal his location.
Yeah, I'm mysterious, baby. I'm always on the move. Man can't catch me that way.
So, Matt, can I just ask you, is it the parents' fault not teaching that kid to be a better, citizen, that he would, that he would act like this, that he'd be scoring drugs, that he'd be doing that, or be a good guy or a bad guy? Is it based in the community?
And economic, too. Economic deprivation, because I heard Ferguson has 0 jobs.
Yeah, what is it still like in Ferguson? Is this...
He doesn't know. He's in Australia. He lost the world about Ferguson.
Yeah, well, there's economic disparity all over the place. I mean, we kind of touched on that earlier about that's sort of a side issue. So, yeah, whether or not
what about a revolution?
He was the thing about revolutions are, historically now, revolutions are usually very bloody and very violent, and they don't usually end well. I mean, the American Revolution is kind of an exception, and the main difference, like if you look at like the French Revolution, for example, that did not go well. You had lots of people getting beheaded, and ultimately, the French state ended up back in the hands of a dictator named Napoleon. You can look at, more recently, contemporary, the Arab Spring. Look at all the revolutions that are occurring the past, 3-4 years in the Middle Eastern world. Most of them have not gone well. Like in Egypt, they deposed Mubarak, and then they hired, they elected Mosri and the Muslim Brotherhood, and they were not governing well and were equally corrupt and ineffective. And it seems like now, look at Libya. I mean, Libya, that was originally a war about deposing Gaddafi, and now that has devolved into a bloody civil war, a bloody mess that created a power vacuum that is the reason we have ISIS, or at least part of the reason that we have ISIS. Is the power vacuum following the fall of Gaddafi allowed for Muslim fundamentalists who were originally Syrian rebels that we, especially the Republicans in our government, were talking about arming a year ago. And they were criticizing our president because he wasn't going to arm the free Syrian rebels. He was hesitant to do that. And he just got beat to death. Oh, he's got, no spine, and he's gutless and this and that. And a year later, those guys, or at least some of those guys, certain factions turned into, what would become ISIS or ISIL, whatever you want to call them. And now those same, war hawks that were saying we needed to support the Syrian rebels a year ago are now saying we need to devote, forces to go and fight ISIS. So, the thing is with revolutions, it's like Pandora's box. Once you get that ball rolling, there's no telling where it's going to go. There's no telling when it's going to end, or how bloody it's going to get, or if the system you'll have afterwards is going to be better than the system you started with. So like I said, the American Revolution was the exception because of several things. Number one, the imperialist force we had an ocean between us and the imperialist force that wanted to subjugate us. Number two, the intellectual leaders that started the revolution, unlike the French Revolution and others, pretty much remained in charge of things from beginning to end. The John Adams, the Jeffersons, the George Washingtons, the Ben Franklins of the quote-unquote heroes of our revolution, set the ball rolling in 1775, and we're still there leading things in 1781. That is very unusual. As a student of history, I can tell you that almost never happens. So my position, and I certainly am willing to debate and willing to accept other points of view, but my position is, as bad as things are in our system, sometimes working within our legal framework is still the best option, in my opinion. I know a lot of negativity is always what the media focuses on, and hence what we get focused on.
Yes.
But really, as flawed as it is, think about this. Every 4 years, the American presidency is arguably the most powerful position in the free world. It changes hands every 4 or 8 years, and never a bullet fired in the street, never a body dropped, never a conflict. Power changes hands peacefully in this country for the most part. And I still think that's worth saving. I mean, even in 2000, when the election was up for dispute, it went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, obviously, guys like me are going to think that, the Bush camp kind of muscled their way into the presidency. But regardless, still, power changed hands without firing a shot. And I think that's, better than the potential alternative. Now, back to, that previous discussion about, should his parents have done a better, with Michael Brown, should his parents have done a better job raising him? That's kind of a side issue as to whether or not, the murder, to me, those are two distinct and separate things, because whether or not Michael Brown was a quote-unquote good person is totally debatable. I mean, it depends on what your value system is, what metric you're going to use to measure quote-unquote good or bad. That is a very subjective argument, and you can have a million different opinions, and they could all be right. To me, the bigger issue is that whether or not he was a good person, it doesn't matter. Was he murdered or was he shot in self-defense? That's what matters. Whether or not, in this country,
Convicted. Sorry, go.
But there is the murder and manslaughter. Either way, it's manslaughter.
My personal opinion is that I agree with you. Like I said, I think it should have at least gone to trial.
What if he did go to trial? What if he was convicted? totally different case, right? Totally different field.
And the thing is at least with a trial, like I said, you're going to get discovery. You're going to have two opposing attorneys cross-examining witnesses to discover what's true and what's BS. And you know, most of the people, I know a lot of people out there will be like, well, he was, you know, acquitted by a grand jury. To those people, I would say, do some research and educate yourself about the grand jury handing down indictment, the process in this country. Getting off of being indicted is not the same as a not guilty verdict in a trial. I won't bore you guys or you know, anybody who's watching with you know, a 15-minute discussion about how grand jury indictments work, but basically, you know, you get 12 jurors selected from the community. Only 3 of them have to say an indictment is not warranted for it to get thrown out. So 9 of 12 jurors have to agree that an indictment is warranted for one to come down. And historically speaking in our country, it pretty much boils down to what the prosecutor wants. It's the prosecutor's prerogative to present the evidence any which way he pleases. So when you have a district attorney who's essentially a colleague of this law enforcement officer, and this particular district attorney in Ferguson is also the son of a ex-police officer who was killed in the line of duty. So yeah. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, you know, whether just because he was, you know, not indicted by a grand jury where the majority of them are white, middle class, to me that doesn't mean anything. That's not the same as a not guilty verdict.
Let me add to that. That's really good because Pastor Blackman had written in his sermon for the day, anticipating the grand jury, that it was already decided not to indict Officer Wilson. Well, basically, there was an uproar in the community because the community was already ready for this, and they would like to see justice, obviously. And they're going on campaigning Black Lives Matter. They're wearing anonymous flags, the anonymous face mask, V for Vendetta, and they're boycotting different things like the Montgomery bus boycott.
Right.
It reminds me of that, and it kind of reminds me of the 1960s when they were doing the Vietnam stuff, and basically.
But then, if you're coming from a place of ignorance, okay, let me just say, because I don't know exactly point form what happened. This happened, that happened, and then he was indicted. But it's like, okay, well then it's done, isn't it? Why are people still rioting? Isn't it over? People are just still upset. You know, I mean, it's been done. The verdict has been laid out.
That's the picture, man. There's being tear gas.
See, it's
everyone's getting involved in this.
But it's over though. Now it's just about the community.
No, but there's new cases that happen. A 12-year-old was shot in Cleveland. In New York, they're arresting everyone. There's people rioting. There's old school 1960s people coming in. So, the Vice video that I just showed you, there's a woman that says, it's like the 1960s. I'm going back to it. I think there's a unbalance of power, and I don't feel like my voice matters. It's always the rich people that are getting elected. I want to help out because I remember we overturned Vietnam, and I agree with some of it. It just should be a little bit more balanced. I understand. We have to check our privilege at the door because we have white privilege. We don't know what it's like to be an Aboriginal. We don't know what it's like to be a black person, and you can see little things that happen, or dressing like you're in the hip hop group back in the day. You got racially profiled in stores, racially profiled in your car, what type of music you're listening to, your different type of car, your rims on your car, everything matters. So, obviously, we're trying to balance things out. But even if they do riot, it's not going to change the racism. It's almost going to make them look more like animals, more like unintellectuals, people that don't really know what they're doing. And it's going to make, us versus them, rather than being one, man. Let's bring back the spirituality. We need to be one. We need to be together. We need to live life like we need to have more love in our life. We need to live love, and live in love. I like it. And body, mind, spirit. We got to beat this media system, beat all this fucking scare tactics, beat the fear.
We can't all just be pacifists though, as well. I mean, ultimately, we need a judicial system. So it comes down to you're about to head back to America in the next 24 hours, 48 hours.
That's it.
Is it going to be safe, man? Is the whole of America in an uproar right now? You're saying I'm hearing words like revolution, and that's not something lighthearted. That's not within a small community. That's like a nationwide thing. A revolution is like a generation
generational, and that's, I guess, why it would come down to color of skin, class, wealth and class and stuff like that as well, because this revolution or this outrage over this incident has sparked just another reason why the community is sick of these police officers.
Well, it's us versus them. It's like the 99% versus one.
Matt, I mean, is it safe over there? What's going on, man?
Is it safe? Because
Right.
Is it safe to be around certain places in the States? Is there violence happening all over? Is the
whole country
rioting
in an uproar?
No, I mean,
Just media hype?
I think you always have to keep in mind when you're watching a major news network that they're still a business, at least in this country. They're a business, and the two things that always sell best are fear and anger. Fear and anger. So you have to understand that you need to, and that's why I try and read my news from a variety of different sources, because I don't care who you're getting your news from, whether it's MSNBC or Fox or CNN or Huffington Post or whatever news outlet you like.
Yeah. We love it all, Matt. And basically what you're getting at is that the news does control how we think. The news does control things. And based on that, we need to have anti-news and also educate the people on a balanced profile and a balanced way of thinking about stuff, and getting podcasts in your head, people that stimulating thoughts,
New thought.
people that can control what goes in one ear and educate themselves on what's going on, studying sociology and being a philosopher of how life works, how the injustice work, how the 99% works, who's in charge of the banking systems, who's in charge of the NSA, who's following you on Facebook, who is actually giving a fuck. But we also need to get communities together, people in this forum that are open-minded and are consciously aligned, rather than just a bunch of fear-mongering idiots that are saying black versus white. They want to separate us. They want to get us separate. But in the end of the day, we got to work. We got to be involved with everyone. We got to be in society where we don't have to have fear, where we think that we're at war with someone who's wearing a turban, and we're at war with someone who's a different color than us.
Understanding is a big key.
I'm friends with the Aboriginals now. I went on a bushwalk. I went on a few different places of enlightenment, and I've done a lot of different ceremonies, and I don't have the fear at all. But when I was living in the States during 9/11, I had a bit of fear towards anyone who was Islam, and now that I learn more and more about the systems and learn about the anti-religion, I know where the money's coming. I research about Halliburton and the Bush administration and the London and Bilderberg groups. I know that there's also agendas that we don't understand as just silly jabronis working 9 to 5s. So it's our job. This is what I do this show for. I'm very passionate about bringing the information that's real, raw, and truth,
and getting outside views, like someone like myself who isn't watching the news and isn't in the know, and I hear little bits and pieces here and there. And yeah, I'm outraged as well, and I'm wanting to get out in the streets and get involved in it, but I don't actually know what's going on, and that is why we're having riots and looting and stuff like that, instead of these peaceful protests, which are more of like a community banding together for justice, I feel, anyway.
100%. And we're obviously all about peace and love, and that's what usually works. We've seen this happen. You can just study history. The Genghis Khan era, the whole imperialism era of the Roman Empire, which is still continuing, the raiders of the Vikings, and now we're sort of seeing Israeli Zionists with Bilderberg, with the Federal Reserve, the people that are the corporations that are in control. You can read Russell Brand's Revolution book. He breaks it down from head to toe. Then he talks about a utopia. Usually revolutions don't work, but in the cases of like Cuba and Che Guevara and Fidel Castro, they actually overthrew the government, and that's why the U.S. doesn't want anything to do with the government, or doesn't want to do anything with. They just went communism because that's all who would accept them. So there is a big power movement, but we need to understand that we shouldn't be like that. Let's create a utopia. Let's create a life that is continuing down the line, that we have more peace and more more justice that's virtuous, rather than just tearing down people with not enough money and, you know, not enough resources, and going to Africa and stealing things, and allowing everyone to work for profit rather than helping the communities, helping people who don't have jobs, helping people who have less education, getting the education to Africa, getting the education to Flint, Michigan, getting the education to underdeveloped societies. And now not just reserving all the good jobs for your skin color, reserving all your jobs for the super intelligent in India, but also, you know, adding skill development, adding knowledge, adding you know, resources that you can just work off of. And now that the educational system's so tied into technology, we don't need to go to school and do the same stuff. We don't need to be trained in the same office structure, same school system format to just be trained to be 9 to 5. We can now reach to the stars and learn to be entrepreneurs and learn to jump outside of the system and not be so fearful of leaving your hometown. You might need to uproot yourself. You're not in a very good area. Leave Ferguson. Leave Flint, Michigan. Get the hell out of there. And I don't care if you don't have enough resources. I know a girl that was in Afghanistan. Her mother walked 9 miles over mountains. Same with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He got walked 9 miles, probably 20 miles through the Australian Alps. His mother wanted him to get out of the certain village that was in war-torn Austria. So let's just talk about like getting through the hero's journey. What is the hero's journey? Why don't we just go through there, and so we can offer some encouragement to the people that are feeling like it's so bleak.
The 2 points I wanted to make about what you're saying there basically is communism always still comes down to a dictatorship because power corrupts, and you know, just naturally. And I know it's cliche, but that is so true. And secondly, what is the ideal utopia? You know, eye for a gun, was it Gandhi said, eye for an eye leaves us all blind? I don't know, like, that's what I'm saying, like, we can't all be pacifists. I mean, you know, both of us are somewhat, we support, is it pacifism? I'm
I believe so.
Aussie, so I don't know.
Something like that.
But naturally, we can't just accept everything and be, oh yeah, he killed the kid, let's just forgive him and let it all go.
There needs
like,
to be, obviously, there's justice, and if this isn't justice through the administrative system, the people have spoke.
Well, exactly. There used to be tribal justice, where
this is tribal justice.
You know, the chief of the tribe would assemble the elders. Dude, and
there's houses being burned down, businesses boarded up. There's all sorts of New York roads being blocked off, blockaded, just like the 9 to 5 or the 5 in San Diego was blocked off. That is millions and millions and millions of people go through that road every day. There's not as much problems with the Mexican community, and they still work illegally in America all over. I think it has to do with, let's be real here, it has to do with some violent association with
so what is the perfect utopia? What is it?
Well, I'm just going to go through some genetic differences. I heard that there is actually a different gene in some of the African American people. Okay. And they have a actual gene and a neuron synapse and cellular structure that is embedded from pain and suffering and a deep-rooted connection to violence and being close to their warrior genes in Africa, rather than someone who's been in a English dynasty and not having so much war and having all this proper stuff, and they don't have as much of a violent gene. And they studied this. They studied this all over in Harvard and a few other studies here. We can bring them up. But there is actually a difference between some subcultures. Just like you're talking about a lion versus a frog. There's different species of human beings as well. You can notice that there's a certain difference between Asians and whites, and there's difference between Indians. They all have these traits that you can find out. Russell Peters, he's a famous comedian. He talks about that all the time, and it's fascinating because he can narrow it down to, you know, a tonality of and different traits and how they act and questions they ask. Like he was talking about, you know, how Indian people barter and how some black people don't tip, and how white people can be too stingy and goofy and nerdy sometimes at the higher end. And
is it that because we've built these mansion houses and we've got these technological phones and computers, is it because of this stuff that we're having this rift? I mean, if we were still living in huts and, you know, someone's looted your hut or burned your hut down, it'd be as simple as moving across the mountain and building another hut, wouldn't it? I mean, it's so ultimately, maybe it's the technology, the age that we're living in. We don't know how to operate with this stuff. We don't know how, you know.
Absolutely. And now that technology has become
the
so
warrior in the suit. You know, this doesn't. We're not hunting animals anymore. We're hunting money.
Yeah, we are hunting money. We have instincts that are killer instincts.
So the Ferguson case, is that to do with as we rounding back to that?
What happened was an animal instinct that kicked in.
Exactly.
There is an animal instinct that pulls that trigger. There's an animal instinct that fires off. If someone punches you in the face, there's an animal instinct. Sometimes we black out. Now, that's not being talked about, but there's a physiological reaction to things. There's a physical reaction, there's an emotional status. And I've had situations where 10 scary black guys were coming at me in a fight. And when I was a little kid, I was a thug, and there was gangster stuff that happened on the streets, and there was gangster stuff that happened in my neighborhood, and we formed alliance of white, Spanish, black guys, whatever. But when you have 10 like strong-looking black guys, and they are quick to fight, they're quick to punch, they're quick to, they are not fearful as much as some of the guys I hung out with. So we're talking about the differences in how people react. Hey, what's going on, Matt? You're back
again.
All right, let me just fill you in. We're talking about whole heaps of stuff, but we're talking about ethnic differences between people and how their violence is changed because of their upbringing, their cultural upbringing, and their community of how they've been raised to actually think from authority figures and think of society.
How a justice system is different, and how a perfect utopia is different for different cultures.
Yeah. So we're reining them back in. Matt will be right back with us in a little bit of technical. We are 4,000 miles away. No, 15,000 miles away from Matt at the time.
It's fun. It's all learning. We're learning here, getting this.
Hey guys, yeah, I apologize for all the. I'm having obviously a ton of technical difficulties.
It's interesting. It's cool. You're like coming and going. Where's
you.
Wally?
I'm just dropping by. You know, if it happens again, you know, I'll probably just let you guys wrap it up. But I promise you and anybody who's watching that the next time we do this, I will make sure I have a proper terminal that is working on all, firing on all cylinders, as they say, so I won't have to, go through this again.
Hey, man,
I apologize for the inconvenience.
Determination, man. You are a stud, and
love the patience.
Everyone, you taught everyone so much, and when this gets posted, I'm sure it's going to affect many people as long as it's marketed right.
Educate a few people, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about everything. We're getting skeptical on religion. Like, why is everyone being separated? Why is religion separated? Why is black and white separated? Do certain religions and backgrounds have more racism and violence in their nature?
I got to say,
well, go ahead.
I was just going to relate a quick story. It isn't even just racial profiling. I remember when I was on the streets, Lord of the Flies style, squatting in a house, and it was like all the neighborhood kids, we were all living together. We were all getting high and just fucking around, whatever. And we were all white, basically. But these kids, I remember my friends, my mates, they were picking on the cops. They were actually harassing the police officers because we had drugs on us, and the cops knew that. They busted us. They took our our weed off us. And we were pissed off. I walked away. I didn't care. It was like, hey, fucking whatever. Let's just get away from the cops. Let's end this. But a few of these wild kids started saying, oh, this cop, he touched me up. He fucking, the cops did this, the cops did that. And it's a bit like, so there are always two sides to it as well. It's not.
Yeah, there's always equality. There is a big. We need to get down to the
harassing the police.
So Matt, for the last couple 15 minutes or so, fill us in with some things you've been pondering. And then we'll respond to what you can come up. Like, what do you think we can do to pretty much settle things down and give people the real story? What's the real story of how can we help this situation?
Right. Well, and I wanted to kind of expound off the point that I was trying to make before my device decided that I shouldn't make it. But and that is that I know it's true in this country, and it's certainly true, when I've gone abroad to places like Israel. The media is always going to sensationalize things and make it feel and seem worse than it appears. So you just have to always take that with a grain of salt. And I'm not singling out any particular news agency. They're all, at least in America, it's entertainment business. I mean, it's a business model. So, their objective is ultimately to get ratings. And, You know, some of them have more journalistic integrity than others. You know, it's a scale, but I would say, you know, because I went to Israel in 2009, right as the Gaza offensive, the first Gaza offensive was going on, when they had tanks in Gaza. And if you were watching the media here in the States, I mean, you just, you know, my girlfriend at the time, like, cried the night before I left because she thought I was going to get bomb dropped on me. So, you know, you have to take those things with a grain of salt. I got over there. It was not like that at all. You know, it was, certainly there were areas that you needed to kind of watch out for.
Right.
But, you know, I never felt unsafe, not once. You know, I never saw any action in the streets. I mean, it just wasn't, not to say that it wasn't a big deal. I'm not trying to minimalize it, but, you know, I don't think this country's going to hell in a handbasket. I think that people focus on the negative too much because the negative sells. Fear and anger sell. And I just think...
Good life so far.
Sorry?
I said that the world is going pretty much, there's no world war. We're kind of keeping everything at bay. It's mostly safe.
Yeah, I mean, and that, I think, is the best thing about getting an education in history. It's certainly not the job prospects after college, but the best thing about an education in history is I feel like it expands your scope. You know, when people say things like George W. Bush is the worst president ever, you know, because I studied American history, I can be like, well, Ulysses S. Grant was pretty bad. You know, just like obscure references like that no one is going to get. And I think, you know, yeah, like the point that Ryan made, yeah, we're not in any world war. You know, I think, you know, the whole world lived with the threat of nuclear annihilation for 60 years during the Cold War. That was pretty bad. You know, the Cuban Missile Crisis in '63. You know, there's always going to be conflict. You know, inevitably there's always going to be conflict. And I think the thing to do, and really what the message I would like to promote above everything is, let's just have a discussion. You know, just like we're doing here tonight. Like, let's just have a discussion, and let's have a discussion with the understanding, and I really wish more people, certainly in this country, were capable of doing it, because it appears like the vast majority just simply is not capable of it. Having intellectual disagreements without letting it turn into vitriol and personal attacks and dragging people through the mud and getting, you know, personally offended. Like, you know, even on that post, Ryan, you know, I had some people who I've been friends with for a long time basically cut me off because I had a difference in opinion over two people, you know, Brown and Wilson, that neither of us have ever met, ever interacted with. It was all intellectual principle, and because we disagreed, you know, they don't want to be friends with me anymore. Which,
you're out of my tribe. You're out of my favorite top five. You're out of my. You don't like the Chargers. I like the Redskins. Oh man.
Right. Exactly. And you know, I just think that there's always going to be conflict. There's always going to be controversy. But if we can come together in a way that allows us to promote discussion without, you know, you can have a different opinion than me. That's fine. That's fine. Tell me why. I'm not going to hate you because you know, you have a different viewpoint or a different value system. You know, and going back to the point that was mentioned earlier about, you know, different cultures and different countries have different values and different moralities. And I think that's important to keep in mind. And ultimately, I know, at least in this country, you know, you guys talked about it a little bit while I was signing back in there about how, you know, why is there this divide between race and between religion and political class? And I certainly think there is a divide, but I think a lot of it is created by the power brokers in this country. My opinion, my personal opinion, is that it's greed centric. It's based on the lust for power and money, and you know, when you have a population that vastly outnumbers you, how do you get your agenda, you know, accomplished? Well, you do it by dividing that mass into smaller groups, you know, divide and conquer. And so I think that really the difference is, like, for example, in this country between Republicans and liberals, I think there's less difference there than most people would really think. I think it has a lot more to do with money, and then you sell a value system that promotes it. Like the Koch brothers, or very powerful folks who really they're interested in more power and more money, and if they happen to pollute the planet or trivialize a minority, then a minority group, then so be it. And the way that you are able to do that is by influencing politics, and you have very clever people crafting messages, again, that are designed to either scare the crap out of you or make you really mad. And those are powerful agents. The ability to communicate your views, as a marketing gimmick, it's a powerful agent. Utilizing things like subconscious suggestion. Those are powerful tools that I think we need to be more cognizant of. I really don't think, if you look at religions, they all, when you get through all the bluster and BS, they all have very similar value codes. And I think, the same is true. Everybody ultimately wants a happy life, to prosper, to see their children grow up in safety, and to have a better life than they had, perhaps. I mean, those are very basic, fundamental human needs and desires that we all can relate to. So if we can start there and have discussions like we're having now without getting pissed off, or without wanting to wring the other guy's neck, even if he completely comes at it from a different angle, that's, in my opinion, how I think progress will be made.
Wow, you just hammered the nail into so many amazing different opinions, and wow, well said, and I couldn't have said it better myself. And people don't realize the system that is in play, and we need to find out the systems and work around them and try to prosper. I don't care if you're in Ferguson or if you're in Australia and you're an Aboriginal. Get with some better educated people. Listen to Life Spirit Tech. Listen to the Joe Rogan show. Listen to read some books. Read some materials that cover the system. Learn your history. Get yourself some friends and family, and talk about philosophy. Talk about some real stuff going on. Quit thinking about.
Don't just talk about. Hello.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. We get distracted by sports and celebrity worship and all those things, and those are all fine and good. Everybody needs trivial distractions, but I think it is important that we not run from issues that might be uncomfortable. And I know that there are folks out there like us who are willing to say things, who are willing to speak our mind, even if it means you might piss somebody off. Sometimes it just has to be done.
You don't want those friends around you.
You're pissing me off, man. You're pissing me off.
Right. Well, I think the thing is, and when I was younger, I used to be one of those people who would get frustrated with people when they wouldn't see my point of view. And I think just the important thing is to try and focus on the things that we all have in common, the things that we all share. Like I said, we all have the same basic hierarchy of needs and desires. Like that's just the human condition. I really believe that underneath it all, minus a very few exceptions. I mean, there are, the sociopaths, and there are certainly evil people out there, but I think they are the smallest of minorities, and the most of us just basically want the same things. And if we can start there and focus on the things we have in common, rather than the things that separate us and divide us, then we can have those discussions where I might have a different viewpoint than you, but it doesn't have to mean that we reach for hate or we turn to hate.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
Wow. People, I think we can take this, if you listen to 15 minutes, if you listen to 20 minutes, you'll get nuggets of information that are going to guide you ahead in life. That's why we made the show. Life, you got to get your spirit in check, and then you got to get your technology in check, and you got to get your body in check. And mostly turn to resources that are going to help you. You might find this 10 years down the line. You might find this 50 years down the line. But the important part is that we're going to hear these stories repeat themselves in history. So we can come together and try to do a non-violence way to expand on things. We can not support certain companies that we know are tied into corruption. we can try to be nicer with some officers, which I've known there's very good officers in Australia. I have to say the police are amazing here.
Even in this country, I know some police officers personally, and they are genuinely good people. They joined the police force for the right reasons, you know, because they felt the need to protect and serve their community. And you know, like I said, those stories need to be told too. So you know, and as far as like, you know, how many minutes this thing run, you know, you can just cut all those little moments of me jumping off and jumping on, and I'm sure, you know, my diatribe won't be quite as long.
Well, we you know, this is real. This is what really happens during a show. There's a whole undercover area, and we sacrifice that, and guess what? It's live. That's what happens when you're live. And I'm sure people see the reality. When I'm on stage doing comedy, when I mess up, I go, "Hey guys, that wasn't funny. Sorry, moving on." You know?
Yeah. It's just a lesson in being prepared, I think, for me, for next time, rather than just kind of like, oh, hey, I'll sign up 20 minutes. I'll just log in 20 minutes before, and it'll be good.
It happened before, but I'm with my microphone too. I mean, we just gotta live and learn, man. Failure makes for a person. One last point I want to drive home is what many people aren't talking about, and this isn't getting to the spiritual side. There's a thing called post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, or disorder, whatever you want to say. And that is a real issue. And one of the expertise I have is in spiritual healing, spiritual alignment, and also a way of dealing with that both biochemically and with substance that will help your body rid some of the trauma. And it's not very easy to do. And I know there's been trauma on the black, white, Islam, police, whatever. I have trauma, you have trauma, but you know, we need to be able to rid that. So certain ways of detoxing it is meditation. That's one of the ways to start, step one. Yoga, getting your body relaxed and not holding the stress within. There's also ways called Reiki energy, like he's doing right now behind me. He's the Christmas Buddha with the fresh mustache. But you know, honestly, there's actually botanical medicines that you can take, and then we're finding more and more ways of using MDMA, more and more ways of using marijuana, more and more ways of using mushrooms, more and more ways of using ayahuasca. And I just went to a PhD inducted ceremony yesterday that talked about a worldwide renowned subject of ayahuasca when people are purging their emotional regrets. We have no idea how much people have gone through in war, in the police force on a daily basis. We're just being ignorant. People watch the news right now. We need to get, next time I think we should get a cop on and talk about the PTSD. Hold on. And back up, man. Hold on. So basically what I'm saying is with the PTSD, there is a serious way to purge, and there's a serious way to move forward. And that's one of the things we're not dealing with. People have demons inside, and we can purge that both spiritually with chemicals, and we can do it with meditation, hypnosis. There needs to be a forum. And Chris Klein or Chris Kiley, the decorated Navy SEAL man, he was just talking about. Yeah, he was just talking about that on a podcast with Joe Rogan. That he actually was suffering, and he had it all together. He was the strongest guy of the whole military industrial complex, and he actually had problems. He had to admit that he needed more people that know the post-traumatic syndrome. He needed ex-cops, ex-military to guide him through, and the systems aren't there for healing. So it's guys like me who are healers, guys like Will who are healers, and many of the people in my community and your community that can educate and heal. And I just want to say thank you so much for all your fucking input. Let's do this again and again. And
I would love to do it.
I think we'll have to do a part 2 pretty soon here and get everything all set. But for the viewers out there, thank you for tuning in, staying for the whole show. Matt, again, man, I know, go get some great sleep, man. You really contributed.
I was really happy to have you to be on. Like I said, I think this is really healthy, and I was, thank you for putting it together. I was really happy to be here, and yeah, like next time I would love to. I tried to get my friend Captain Danny Marr on. I think he's still willing to do it. He was just out of town and didn't respond in time. But I would love to get someone whose viewpoints are diametrically opposed. Danny is a guy I'm talking about. Great guy, ex-Marine,
Well
just
spoken.
one of the most insanely funny, crazy, most fun, genuine, warm-hearted people to be around, but has a very, very different take on specifically the whole Ferguson thing and law enforcement. And you know, I would love to get someone from that camp on the next time, you know, so we can have a, you know, a kind of diametrically opposed discussion where it's not just kind of us saying what we think, but, you know, I think it's important to include the other viewpoint as well.
This is the educational to people who don't know, and we're giving you the real raw truth from many different perspectives and what we've come across. And then, you know, next time let's get a person who thinks opposite, and I'll line something up, and we'll shoot for at the end of the holidays.
That'd be great. I'd love to come back.
Awesome, brother. Take care, man. Peace out from Sydney.
See you, buddy.
Later.
Bye.